The wind that swept the Barrowlands in the late chill of first frost carried with it a silence too heavy for autumn. It muffled the hooves of Jon Snow's courser as he pressed north with the vanguard of scattered riders, every breath turning to brief plumes of white. Ravens wheeled overhead but offered no call. Even the leaves seemed to scurry mutely across the road. The north was holding its breath, and Jon feared it knew something he did not. 3 days earlier, Samwell Tarly's falcon had brought news from Lass Hearth. A breach in the wall's shadow forts, columns of dead moving south, and the crest of pale riders led by a horned shadow. For once, the words on Sam's parchment were cleaner than the ink stains usually smudging his script, as though dread had steadied his hand. Yet, the line that struck Jon cold came at the end. Bran has not returned from his ranging, and the ravens we sent never found him. Bran.ki. Jon gripped the reins until the leather cut into his gloves. When last he'd seen his brother, no, he reminded himself, his true cousin, from the ramparts of Winterfell, the boy's eyes had already stretched beyond the courtyard walls, glassing over with some half-dreamt vision of the past, or the terrible now. Bran had left the castle soon after, riding in the shade of the old weirwood carriages, and guarded by Meera and a small band of archers. He insisted on seeing the heart tree of the Wolfswood again, insisting the faces of the old gods spoke differently in the hours before dawn. Jon had trusted him. Everyone had. Bran was the three-eyed raven. Who would deny a raven its flight? Now, he rode north with no promise Bran still lived. The truth, he feared, was worse. If the Night King had touched him again, truly touched him, then Bran might be alive only in the barest sense of flesh. Jon kept that thought buried. It could wait until they reached the broken tower, and he could see the boy's own eyes and feel the bond that still tugged at the corners of his mind like a loose thread. At dusk the riders made camp on the edge of a rotten field where harvest had never taken. Ghost prowled beyond the lantern glow, his red eyes cutting the grasses, and returned with nothing but brittle stalks clinging to his pelt. Torment Giantsbane rubbed warmth into his beard beside Jon. "You smell it, Crow?" the wildling asked. "The stink of no songs, no animals. Dead lands, dead air." Jon nodded. They could light no great fires. The flames might be seen by eyes without life. They ate cold bread and harder cheese, and when the moon climbed, Jon took the night watch. Ghost shared it, padding silent circuits around the ring of uneasy men. In that hush, Jon thought he heard the weirwood's voice, a low, bone-distant moan that threaded through the wind, as if the trees themselves braced for agony. By morning, they were within sight of the Wolfswood. Smoke coiled above it in thin, gray ribbons. Jon spurred forward, his riders spreading like an arrowhead. They found the cart path churned into black mud, flecked with shards of hafted dragon glass. Smeared upon them were fine, reddish streaks Jon knew too well, Meera's frog spear oil, mixed with blood. The ground was a tangle of frozen footprints, yet at the center lay a deep impression. A body pressed flat, then dragged. The drag trail ended where the prints of the dead began. Bare feet in winter. Dozens, perhaps hundreds, moving north. Torment knelt beside a broken wheel. "Small camp here," he muttered. "Your brothers?" "Eh." Jon sifted snow away to reveal a splintered walnut haft. He turned it over. The bottom edges bore tiny notches where Bran had whittled practice runes of the old tongue. Jon's vision blurred at the memory of Bran's patient carving by firelight. The haft was snapped near the middle. Sticky resin clung to one end where the dragonglass spearhead had shattered. "They fought," Jon whispered. Tormund grunted. "Aye, but who won?" "I see no corpses." Jon swallowed. "The Night King takes what he wants for his army. There'll be no corpses." The knowledge pressed on him like chainmail in water. Bran, whose mind had woven the past, present, and the scribbled corners between, was likely in enemy hands, or worse, twisted into an unwilling spy. Jon closed his eyes and, just for a moment, tried to feel his brother in the hush of the woods. Nothing answered. Far to the north, beyond the faintest border of living breath, a pale fortress rose from an ice lake like a jagged wound in the world. Its towers were sculpted by cold winds and necrotic craft, glimmering under dying auroras. Within the tallest spire hung a chamber rimmed by blue-lit braziers that gave no heat. Bran Stark lay on a marble slab, his eyes rolled back, arms limp at his sides. The Night King stood over him, gauntlets sheathed in black frost. With deliberate slowness, he pressed a single frozen finger between Bran's brows. Bran could not move. When they had ambushed him at the Heart Tree, Mira's screams had cracked the night like lightning. He had tried to warg into Hodor, into Summer, into anyone, but the Night King's power filled the God's Wood like a tidal surge, drowning the connection. And then came the breaking. A searing cold that choked his lungs as the whites tore at his legs, snapping bones like reeds. Mira's spear had flown one last time before a blade of crystal passed clean through her side, pinning her to the roots. Bran had watched her blood steam in the snow. The tree's face wept red, but its tears could do nothing. Now, he felt nothing below his ribs. He had thought paralysis familiar, but this was somehow deeper, as though even the parts of him that still sensed the world were being erased by the Night King's touch. He opened his eyes, not of his own will, and saw flickers of time. Ned polishing ice under gray skies, Hodor laughing as a young Bran clung to his back, a dragon's shadow sweeping over King's Landing. But the visions were inverted, their edges bitten by frost. The Night King sifted through them like pages, his face stony in victory. Bran tried to lock his mind, but the cold was everywhere. At the edge of thought, he felt the weirwood network, the vast net of roots and faces, receding from him, shrinking into a pinpoint of light. The Night Kings will barricaded it, seeking the secret paths Bran once used. Bran wondered, with a detachment that frightened him, whether the Night King understood the old strange truth, that to see time was to shape it. If he discovered how to command those currents, there would be no future left to defend. Arya Stark arrived at Winterfell's gates as night crept in behind her. She had left King's Landing scarcely a fortnight ago with Gendry, riding north on rumors that the dead had returned in numbers unseen since the long night. Gendry remained in the yard to see their horses tended. Arya crossed the courtyard in 4 quick strides, passing the smithies where the half-forged dragonglass met steel. Sansa greeted her before the hearth in the great hall, hair pulled tight, the faint stain of ink across her fingers. A growing forest of parchment reports littered the high table. Sansa's eyes lifted at once to Arya's face, searching for signs of what she had seen on the King's Road. "Word from Jon?" Arya asked. "None." The Lady of Winterfell tapped a missive. "But last hearth fell 2 nights past. House Umber is gone, save a handful of survivors crawling south. They say the dead ride faster than wind." Arya clenched her jaw. She had not outrun fate, only circled back to its jaws. "And Bran?" Sansa's reply was a whisper. "Lost. We pray the old gods guide him, but ravens find only snow and empty woods." Arya's hand drifted to Needle's hilt. "Then I'll scour those woods myself." Sansa's gaze hardened. "Arya, if the Night King has Bran, he has the vision of the 3-eyed raven. That means he sees more than we can hide. We have one hope. Hold Winterfell. Jon comes with the Unsullied and the dragons. We survive the first night." "At the cost of Bran?" Arya spat. No. He's our brother." "He is more than that now," Sansa said. "He's the memory of the realm, and if the Night King tried to break that memory..." Her voice faltered. "I think he aims to make history itself his servant." Arya felt a chill that had nothing to do with winter. She remembered the gallery of faces in the House of Black and White, how each mask held a story, a life. Take away the stories, and the faces meant nothing. The Night King, it seemed, would claim every face for his own blank ledger. She turned toward the stairs. "If Bran still lives, he needs a blade swifter than the wind. I'll ride at first light." "Arya, you know I must." Sansa closed the distance and embraced her. The crackle of the fire seemed suddenly frail against the coming dark. "Then bring him home," she whispered. The march from Dragonstone had carried Daenerys Targaryen across half the realm, her dragons wheeling above like twin moons. Yet even riding in the heat of their breath could not keep the worries from her mind. Tyrion had spoken of a strange tremor in the stone at Eastwatch, the ruins humming with the echo of an enemy spell. Now, As Winterfell's ramparts crested the horizon, she saw banners in disarray and watchfires burning at double the number. She found Jon in the courtyard hours before dawn, leaning against the flank of Rhaegal, who huffed restlessly. His eyes glittered in the torchlight when he turned. "Bran?" she asked. "Taken," he answered hoarsely. "And more than crippled. Something is wrong in the very roots of the world." He told her of the shattered godswood and the drag marks, of the quiet forest where nothing lived. Each word weighed heavier than the last. She laid a hand on his arm. "We will bring him back." He shook his head. "If we leave Winterfell undefended, the dead will roll through the north unopposed. And if Bran falls to the Night King's will, he will know every gate, every weakness in our walls." Daenerys stared at the silent keep. Dragons could scorch an army of the dead to ash, but how did one burn away knowledge already seized? Jon's fear was not for walls, but for the shape of the world itself. Rhaegal shifted, tilting his massive head to regard his rider with eyes like polished jade. Jon stepped forward and pressed his brow against the warm scale. "My brother is somewhere beyond that darkness," he murmured. "If the dragons can find him by heat or magic." Daenerys nodded slowly. "Then let us hunt at first light. Drogon for the sky, Rhaegal for the low passes. We strike where the dead gather thickest. We draw out their master. And if Bran stands with him—" Jon's voice wavered. "Then we remind your brother who he is," she said, though neither of them knew whether memory or fire could cut through the Night King's hold. Still, some truths must be uttered aloud or be strangled by dread. She seized Jon's hand. "We do not forsake our own." Dawn arrived as a blade of pale gold, slicing the black horizon, but it cut no warmth. From the battlements, Arya watched the first dead appear in the field, hundreds at the margin of sight. They did not charge. They simply halted, as though waiting for a silent signal. Frost smoked from eye sockets where blue flames flickered quietly. The Night King emerged atop an elk-sized white, his spear of ice glinting. Draped across the beast's withers lay a bundle wrapped in wolf pelt. Bran, limp, his eyes dark hollows. Around him clustered 4 White Walkers, armor of rime clicking glassily. A hush fell over Winterfell's walls. No horns, no drums, just the thinning barrier of living breath between the living and the endless. Jon stood upon the highest gatehouse with Daenerys at his side. "He wants parley," Jon muttered. Tyrion, wind-chilled, exhaled. "Or he wants you to open the gates." Daenerys narrowed her gaze. "Send a lone rider under a white flag. The Night King broke no promise at Hardhome because none were made, but we will make him break one now." Jon inhaled through clenched teeth and turned to Grey Worm. "Fetch Davos. We treat, but we do not trust. If I give the signal, the dragons fly." Now and across the snow, the Night King sat silent. Bran's head lolled, and for a heartbeat Jon imagined he saw a flicker of recognition. A plea. Or was it merely the dying candle of the boy's own will? He could not know, but the answer lay at the end of whatever words the Night King meant to offer, or perhaps at the tip of an unseen dagger waiting in the cold hush between heartbeats. He descended the stairs, heart like iron striking iron, the voice of his dead father echoing. "When the snows fall and the white winds blow, the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. Yet if the pack's heart is taken, what remains but the empty howl of winter?" Bran floated in a dream of treetops painted silver by moonlight. His body, broken below the waist, rested on a bed of black feathers. The caws of ravens were gone. Instead he heard the soft weeping of leaves, every branch mourning. Somewhere below, Jon walked through a field of buried swords. Each blade rose toward him as though drawn by an unseen puppeteer. Yet Jon trudged on, oblivious, eyes searching for a gate he could not see. Bran tried to call out, but only snowflakes left his mouth. Snow that fell upward, carried by a wind that yanked the dream sideways until it tore like parchment. He plunged into darkness, and there he felt the Night King's thought brush against his own. A cold curiosity older than words, prying at the door where time was kept, and Bran understood, with blinding clarity, what the Night King wanted. Not merely the death of men. The death of memory. A night so deep it swallowed even the idea of fire. Within that vast nothing, Bran reached blindly. He seized on the tiniest ember. A flickering wolf shape bounding across fresh snow under bright, unmistakable torches. Arya de Tal. She was close, her mind sharp as Valyrian steel. He could not speak, but he sent a pulse, a soft ripple through the roots of the world. The Night King felt the tremor and pressed his finger harder into Bran's brow. Ice crept through Bran's veins. He screamed without sound. But the ripple had flown. Arya, riding hard through the wolfswood's outer edge, felt her heart stutter. For an instant, the trees around her groaned like great ancient doors swinging open. She yanked her horse to a halt and stared at the road ahead, where snow drifted in lazy spirals. Her pulse rang in her ears. Then she saw it. A single leaf from a weirwood, impossible this deep in the wood, falling before her path. She caught it before it touched the ground. On its surface, etched not by knife, but by some gentle burn, was a sigil, a direwolf chained by ice. Beneath it, a crack like lightning split the bark red. Bran's plea. She turned her horse, drew needle from its sheath, and leaned low over the withers. The forest blurred. Behind her, Gendry's distant shout was swallowed by the hush. She let the horse choose its steps, trusting the bond of wolf and rider and something more ancient to guide her to her brother, before the last fires of memory were smothered forever. Jon Snow stood beneath Winterfell's gatehouse arch, Davos at his side, facing the Night King across a no-man's land of brittle frost. Bran's body rose and fell with each breath of the undead mount, proof enough he still lived. Yet his eyes, black as storm clouds, did not move. Jon forced himself not to call out. Words were weapons here, and the wrong ones might slice his hope in two. The Night King lifted his free hand, palm out, in a gesture that almost resembled peace. When he spoke, the voice came not from cracked lips but from the very air, a brittle rasp that sifted into Jon's skull like needles of ice. Give me the raven, and no more need die tonight. Jon's fingers tightened on the hilt of Longclaw. He is no raven. He is Bran Stark of Winterfell. Need. The Night King's tilted head suggested a curiosity, almost human. The bargain is mercy. Deny it, and the snows will fall eternal, blanketing name and blood alike. And what would you do with him? Jon demanded, resisting the urge to glance at Bran. Turn him? The Night King's eyes burned bluer for an instant. He is already shattered. The roots of memory rot. Soon the fruit will fall into my hands. Jon felt a raw surge of rage that cleared his thoughts to perfect steel. And after that, all ends. The Night King's silence was answer enough. Davos cleared his throat. My lord, remember the plan. Jon drew a slow breath, letting the icy burn steady him. Across the field, Daenerys waited in the shadow of Rhaegal's wing beats. Tyrion's gaze tracked every twitch of the Night King's spear. I will give you nothing, Jon said. Winterfell stands, the North remembers, and memory fights back. He raised his hand, signaling. The Night King's fingers clenched. Jon saw the spear tip tilt a fraction toward Bran's throat. A roar split the sky. Drogon descended, wings beating thunder. Rhaegal a heartbeat behind. Flames spiraled, gold and green, engulfing the forward ranks of dead, turning them to black snow. The Night King wheeled his mount away. Bran's limp form slipped sideways, dangling by the bindings at his wrists. Jon charged, Longclaw high, Davos shouting at his heels. But as Dragonfire fell, a wall of opaque blue burst upward, an ice shield curving into the air. Drogon's flames skittered off, hissing into steam. Jon felt the temperature crash, breath freezing in his beard. The Night King rode behind the barrier, spear curling with frost. White swarmed in twisting eddies, some melting under fire, others ripping charred limbs from the ground and staggering on. The fight for Bran, and perhaps for every story ever told, had begun. Ghost vaulted over the parapet, white fur streaking with ash, and crashed into a skeleton knight. Jon followed, blade singing, cutting through the first ring of undead with grim precision. He could not afford missteps. Every heartbeat counted while Bran hovered between life and a living tomb. Above, Daenerys screamed Dracarys again. Rhaegal's flame lanced through a thinned gap in the ice shield. For a breath, Jon glimpsed the Night King, one arm raised to shield against the torrent, skin blistering white, eyes never blinking. Bran's body was thrown free, rolling into the snow 30 paces ahead. The Night King snarled, more expression than Jon had ever seen him show, and leapt from his mount, spear spinning to skewer Jon's path. Jon closed, heart a furnace. He barely registered the icy wind coursing off the blade. Their weapons met, steel on enchanted ice, sparks exploding in white and silver. Behind them, Bran lay motionless, but Jon sensed a stirring beyond flesh. A fumbling grip toward the roots of a world tree. Bran could no longer feel, yet would not relinquish. If he could but rise in mind, if Arya could reach him, if Sansa held the walls, if the living stood a little longer, then perhaps the Night King's dream of endless oblivion would crack. All those ifs hung in the air like shards of glass poised to fall, and Jon knew he could only answer them with the single certainty of a man holding a sword. He would not yield. The ice spear screeched across Longclaw's edge in a flare of moonlit sparks. Jon's arms shook from the impact, but the moment his blade slid free he stepped inside the Night King's reach, shoulder driving hard against frozen mail. The creature did not yield. The air itself wove around him like steel banding. A backhand sent Jon reeling, boots skidding on frost-slick ground. When he staggered upright, the Night King was already advancing, spear-dipping for Jon's heart. A howl cleaved the din. Ghost rammed the white elk broadside, jaws tearing at its necrotic flank. Jon saw antlers whip, saw Ghost flung aside in a whirl of splintered bone, but the distraction broke the Night King's rhythm. Jon lunged low, hacked at the spear haft. Valyrian steel bit, shaving a sliver of crystal. Cold lightning snapped through the weapon and hurled Jon backward. He rolled, ribs aflame, and sprang to a crouch just as Davos and a ring of northern spearmen poured in to shield him. Above, Drogon veered hard as twin scorpion bolts of ice shot from the White Walker's arbalests. One bolt grazed his neck, carving a plume of ember-bright blood. The great dragon shrieked, banking wildly. Rhaegal dropped to cover, his own fire raking a score of wights into cinders before smashing their launchers beneath his talons. Still, the dead came. They poured over the melted gaps like an avalanche. Skeletal hands fused with puckered flesh, eyes burning implacably blue. Grey worms, unsullied line, knelt in perfect unison, shields locking, obsidian spears bristling. The first wave shattered on that disciplined wall, yet claws scrabbled for purchase even as bodies disintegrated. Broken fingers crawled like spiders until a boot crushed them. Inside Winterfell, the bell of the broken tower tolled once, twice, Sansa's signal that the southern breach yet held. Gendry vaulted a fallen shutter, hammer whirling, yelling for men to reinforce the west sally port. His smith's arms struck with the rhythm of anvils. Each blow crunched bone, but sweat froze upon his brow the instant it left his skin. Tyrion Lannister watched from the maester's rookery high atop the ramparts, quill clenched so tight it snapped. Below, the courtyard writhed in firelight and shadow. He glanced at Bran's little slate board, abandoned near the hearth, a single chalk line trailing off the edge as if mid-thought. Bran had been scribbling patterns of circles intersecting circles, the memory web, and Tyrion suddenly grasped the intention. If the Night King severed enough strands, the past itself would collapse like a burned library roof. He hurled the broken quill aside and limped for the stairs. "We need the dragons focused on the walkers, not the hordes," he shouted at any runner who would listen. "Tell Daenerys, cut off the commanders." But Daenerys had already seen. She guided Drogon into a climbing spiral, his neck arching, jaws gulping night air before releasing a cone of wildfire-bright heat. The ice scorpion teams evaporated. Yet even in triumph, she felt the new weakness in Drogon's wing. Blood droplets hissed on his scales. If he bled too freely, riding the thermals would soon be impossible. Across the battlefield, the Night King sensed her dilemma and shifted tactics. He thrust the butt of his spear into the earth. Frost crackled outward in concentric rings. From the ground erupted jagged pillars of obsidian-colored ice, mirror spires that smoked with captured fire. They bent Drogon's next torrent back toward him in a gust that scalded his chest. The dragon screamed, banking away. Jon saw the maneuver. "He's locking her out," he rasped to Davos, then met the old knight's steady gaze. "Hold them a while longer. I'm ending this." Davos' voice came thin through chattering teeth. "Aye. And I suppose you'll ask nicely for the spear." "No," Jon said. "But someone else might." He sprinted. Sword low, cloak snapping, he dove through a tangle of charred bones, slid beneath an ice lance, and vaulted over a toppled white bear, whose ribs still smoldered. Each heartbeat thundered. If Bran's mind broke completely, the Night King would gain the map to every soul still living. The Night King watched Jon's approach with ancient calm. He drew the spear from the soil. Frost dusted the blade like hoarfrost on crystal. Behind him, Bran's body twitched. A shudder rippled his fingers. His eyes fluttered. Somewhere, miles away yet impossibly near, Arya Stark rode as though the wind itself bore her forward, guided by a thread of weirwood blood possession. Inside Bran's mind the storm raged. He floated amid collapsing archways of memory, Winterfell's courtyard fracturing into shards that tumbled into black voids, Ned's face smearing like wet paint, the wall warping into a single, screaming note. At the center stood the Night King's specter, hand pressed to an invisible vault door. Each guttural word he whispered became a hammer strike upon that lock. Forget. 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 Bran forced himself to look away from his father's vanishing outline and conjured a different scene. A sing-song voice in a library tower. Old Nan recounting the first long night, her candlelight trembling as if frightened of its own shadow. He grasped that memory like a sword hilt. "This," the Night King hissed, "is the first to die." The vision blurred. Bran felt the tendons of the world tree thrumming around him. They were bruised but not severed. He dived into them, wove outward, carrying old Nan's tale along the roots like a torch in catacomb passages. He emerged beside a lone rider galloping beneath moon-silver branches. Arya's eyes shone, wide with urgency. Bran did not speak. Speech had no place here. But he flung the story toward her, a pulse of childhood binding. The rider straightened, spurred harder. Back on the killing field, Bran's right hand jerked free of its lashings and closed over the dagger strapped across his waist. The Valyrian steel catspaw blade Arya had given him for safekeeping months ago. His fingers, barely responsive, fumbled, yet managed to draw it under his mantle, so it lay hidden against his ribs. The Night King turned, alerted by some inner tether. That moment of inattention was enough. Jon sprang, Longclaw whistling a downward arc duty. The Night King parried with his spear, angling the tip into Jon's gut. Only a hair's breadth, but blood welled hot against iron. Jon twisted, pain white-hot, and caught the haft under his arm, locking it. He shoved upward, tangling the spear between them. The creature's ice-barbed grin widened impossibly. With one arm he levered Jon up, feet leaving the ground. Frost crept through chainmail as the spearhead hovered before Jon's throat. The blue eyes drew nearer, their depths a midnight ocean without moon or star. A shadow blurred past Jon's peripheral vision. Ghost? No, another direwolf. Smaller, darker. Nymeria lunged, jaws clamping the Night King's elbow. The spear dipped. Jon tore free, dropped, rolled sideways, clutching his stomach. Nymeria's weight dragged the Night King half-step off balance. Her fangs gnashed, but ice spread across her muzzle. Howling, she retreated, shards of frozen saliva trailing. The Night King advanced again, but a second shape burst from fog. Arya, blade outstretched, snow spraying behind her. She drove low, aiming not at his heart, but at the leather straps binding Bran's torso to the elk hide. 2 slices, clean, razor-fast, parted them. Bran slid limp to the ground beside an upturned shield. The Night King pivoted, spear thrusting. Arya bent backwards in a dancer's arc, the point slashing a lock of her hair. She planted her hand, flipped, landed atop the fallen elk's ribcage, and sprang clear of the next swipe. Jon, shaking, forced himself upright and staggered toward Bran. Arya shouted without turning, "Brother, get him out!" Jon scooped Bran beneath the arms. Agony flared where the spear had grazed him, but he wrestled Bran across the churned snow toward a ring of unsullied rallying nearby. Grey worms saw, barked commands. Shields raised, they formed a cocoon around Jon and his burden. Before the Night King could pursue, Drogon and Rhaegal together screamed earthward. Their combined fire met at a nexus that detonated like a newborn sun. The sapphire barrier fragmented, shards raining. An expanding sphere of steam swallowed silhouettes. Sudden warmth gusted over the field, filling lungs with scalded air. When the whiteness thinned, the Night King still stood. Armor cracked, frost smoking, but his spear lay melted to a glowing stump. He looked from its ruined edge to the circling dragons, then to Arya poised 10 paces away, cat's paw dagger reversed in her palm. Her voice, low as a winter creek, cut the hush. "Leave our story alone." The Night King raised a hand. All at once the dead nearest him crumpled into powder, as if surrendered for something dearer. A shockwave rippled out. Living warriors staggered, torches sputtered. In its wake, 4 shapes emerged. Other White Walkers, taller than the first, each with ice swords drawn. They ringed their king and faced Arya. For the first time, Arya hesitated. She was lethal, but 4 at once, white blades that could shatter a normal weapon, meant certain death unless fortune favored every stroke. It was Bran, barely conscious, who changed the odds. Cradled behind unsullied shields, he reached through the roots again, grasping for a name older than castles. He found a cave beneath a mountain, walls flickering with fireflies, and a woman-child of leaf and bark, teaching a first man the tongue of trees. Bran called her by that verdant name. The ground to Arya's right erupted in a fountain of snow. Out leapt a figure small and slender, skin bark dappled, eyes glowing gold. A child of the forest, spear-tip obsidian, joined Arya without a word. 3 more popped into existence like spores on the wind, arraying themselves at Arya's flanks. The White Walkers shifted stance, not fearful, but acknowledging an old rivalry returned. They advanced. Steel rang against black glass. Arya ducked a thrust, roll slashed, severing a calf. The walker collapsed, but ice mist poured from the wound. He crawled forward still. A child dove drove obsidian into an eye socket. The walker convulsed, shattered into icy motes. Jon watched from within his human shield, feeling Bran's head loll against his chest. "Stay with me," he whispered. "Don't go." Bran's eyes fluttered. "Not gone, but tell the weirwood, remember us." The words came cracked as split timber. "Winterfell remembers," Jon promised. Davos reached them, pressing a wad of cloth against Jon's bleeding side. "He needs the maester," he growled, then shook his head. "7 save us, we've no maester fit for this work." Tyrion appeared, cheeks raw red. "Dragon's fire breaches our stores beneath the crypts. Get them below, warmer there." He cast Bran a look half pity, half awe. If the Night King wants the end of stories, let the crypts where stories sleep guard him. Jon nodded, half-lifted Bran, but Bran seized his wrist with surprising strength. "Not underground," he rasped. "Open sky. Roots need stars." "Bile." Grey Worm cocked his head, uncertain. Jon recalled the heart tree of Winterfell still stood in the Godswood. "Take us to the weirwood," he ordered. As Unsullied formed a moving fortress around them, Arya's duel near the ice pillars raged. 2 walkers remained, one missing an arm, the other gliding with dangerous serenity. Children flitted in and out, darts of obsidian sparking off blades. Arya matched every feint, breath linking with their primal rhythm. Then the sky cracked. Drogon banked low, one wing faltering. From the rear of the battlefield a new shape lumbered. A dead giant, patches of charred flesh hanging by sinew, dot water. On its shoulder rode yet another White Walker, gaunt face split by a grin of shattered icicles. He raised a javelin, not of ice but of some throbbing black crystal. He hurled it. Rhaegal, swooping to guard Drogon's blind side, never saw it. The spear pierced scale, pierced bone, emerged through his breast alight with violet pulses. A roar of agony ripped the clouds. Rhaegal flapped once, twice, then crashed beside the weirwood ridge outside the walls, snow geysering. The shock rolled through dragon and rider alike. Drogon answered with a shriek that trembled the marrow of every living being. He circled wildly, tail-lashing stone battlements, sending men tumbling. Daenerys fought the saddle, tears freezing on her cheeks as she felt her child's pain echo through the bond. Rhaegal thrashed in death throes. Flames guttered weakly from his jaws, melting the snow into boiling rivulets. The black spear pulsed faster, draining what remained of his life. Jon, halfway to the Godswood, saw the fall and stumbled. Bran moaned. A sound of deep roots ripped from earth. Within his mind, Bran watched a young dragon fade in a swirl of memory dust. The Night King laughed, and Bran felt a new fracture inside the vault door. But there's still one story left, Bran thought, the first story the trees ever told. He hurled himself backward through ages, to a moment before the Night King existed. A man kneeling, blade at his heart, surrounded by children of leaf and bark and sorrow. They bound him to ice, made him their weapon. Bran nearly recoiled. Yet, in that instant, he understood the edge of the Night King's loneliness, the roaring emptiness that fed his will to erase all others. Bran reached out, not in pity, but in final counterstroke. You are not the end. You are the wound. Memory is the balm. He flung that thought forward like a comet, breaching the vault door at last. The Night King staggered on the physical battlefield, grip faltering. Arya saw the hesitation, pivoted, drove her dagger home. But the walker she faced turned, ice blade intercepting. Sparks burst, steel ground along enchanted frost. Bran's body convulsed. He sucked a ragged breath and whispered a single name into the world. The name the first man had given Dawn. Jon felt it vibrate, more sensed than heard. All across Winterfell, every living fighter felt their bones ring as if struck by a far-distant bell. From the Godswood the ancient weirwood flared. Its red leaves burst into ghost-white flame that did not consume, but illuminated. A column of pale fire lanced upward to meet the aurora. The snow melted in a perfect circle around its roots, revealing bare black earth and the gleam of long-buried swords. Jon carried Bran into that ring. Steam swirled. The moment Bran's shoulder touched the ground, tendrils of living sap seeped from the roots, wrapping his legs, knitting over shattered bone with a dull ruby glow. Outside the circle, the battlefield shifted. The dead giant froze mid-step. Ice veins crawled across its flesh in reverse, turning frost to watery mist. It collapsed, but did not shatter. Rather, it slumped into normal rot, blue fire in its eyes extinguished. All around, whites hesitated, as if an unheard command faltered. The Night King straightened, rage spasming like cracks across his features. He lifted both hands. Storm clouds swelled, lightning flickering inside them. He meant to break the new conduit between Bran and the weirwood, rip it out by force. Jon stepped in front of Bran. Come then. The Night King swept his arms downward. Bolts of ice-blue lightning hammered the ground. Jon braced for searing cold, but the lightning bent around the circle, rebounded, and struck the Night King himself. His armor absorbed most of it, yet cracks widened. He howled, a sound like glaciers calving. Arya saw her chance. She sprinted, leaping onto the giant's fallen forearm, bounding to the Night King's back. He sensed her, whirled, caught her by the throat mid-air. Fingers closed, frost blooming across her skin. Needle clattered from numb fingers. But Arya's other hand still clutched the cat's paw dagger. She dropped it, caught it again mid-fall with her free hand, just as she had once practiced in a Braavosi courtyard, and drove it into the gap where breastplate met collar. Valyrian steel met the place Bran's memory had cracked wide. The blade sank, as if into water. The Night King's eyes flared incandescent, then subdued to white. His grip slackened. Arya fell away, coughing. A silence rolled out, deeper than snowfall. For a heartbeat nothing moved. Then the night came fissured like glass. Blue light streamed from within, 1,000 trapped stars escaping. The walkers shattered next, turning to flurries of shivering sparks. Every white on the field collapsed lifeless, strings cut. Winterfell's defenders stared, blades half raised, as the dead simply ceased. Jon sagged to his knees. The circle's steam thinned. Bran's legs lay whole, scarred by frost, but straight. He opened his eyes, pools of gray, seeing centuries, and yet seeing Jon. "It is ended," he murmured. "For now." He tried to sit. Jon steadied him. The saproots withdrew, leaving livid wheels like white branches etched on his skin. Daenerys landed in the courtyard. She slid from Drogon's saddle, knees buckling. Her dragon's chest heaved, torn membrane fluttering, but he lived. She looked toward the north ridge where Rhaegal lay still. Tears blurred her vision anew. Tyrion arrived, hair laced with hoarfrost. "The dead have fallen," he breathed. "But, Your Majesty, Rhaegal." "I felt him go," she whispered, touching her heart. "His story is finished." She turned to Jon, Bran, Arya, approaching the godswood where the red leaves smoldered with post-battle glow. "But ours?" Jon rose, blood soaking his surcoat. "Ours continues, if we remember." Bran's faint smile carried sorrow and hope intertwined. "The night is long, but dawn's memory is longer. We rebuild from that." Then they were determined. They helped Bran to a litter. Maester Walken, dragged from his sickbed, knelt weeping with relief and dread over what wounds could and could not be mended. The living dead littering Winterfell's field began to thaw, crumbling into inert heaps of bone and leather. Children of the forest stepped wordlessly into the woods, leaving no prints. Above, the aurora dimmed, replaced by the first true stars in weeks. Sansa emerged onto the battlements, cheeks streaked, hair disheveled. She surveyed the ruin, the smolder, the silence. When her eyes found Bran alive within the titan shadow of the heart tree, she clasped the stone parapet, whispered a prayer to gods old and new, and allowed herself one shuddering breath before turning to the wounded men who needed orders, to the pyres that needed building, to the realm that would soon learn the North had help. Near dawn, Arya slipped outside the walls. She found Nymeria licking frozen blood from her forepaw, watched by a cautious pack of smaller wolves. Arya knelt, pressed her forehead to the direwolf's. "Thank you," she murmured. "Your story too." Nymeria nipped playfully, then bounded among the trees, the pack following. Jon stood atop the cracked battlements once the sun finally rose, a wan glow over a field no longer crawling. He felt older, the cut in his stomach a hot coal, but beneath it all throbbed something like possibility. He turned to Daenerys, who came to stand beside him, still as a carved figure. "We will burn the bodies," he said. "The realm will ask what price the North paid." Her voice was distant. "We'll tell them truth." He looked toward Bran's chamber window, where a candle flickered. "That every victory costs a part of the future, but it gives us the chance to write the rest." Daenerys slid her hand into his. They watched a lone raven wheel across brightening skies, black ink on dawn's parchment, turn south, and vanish beyond the red line where sunrise met the world. Below, Bran slept upon blankets smelling of pine sap. His dreams roamed ruins patched by sapling growth, memory halls newly tended. On a distant branch, an ancient three-eyed crow ruffled its feathers and blinked, satisfied that for this span of turning sun and moon, the tales of men would go on. Winterfell exhaled, and for the first time in living memory, the breath did not freeze upon the air. The smoke of the pyres drifted for 3 days before the skies cleared completely, and when the wind finally turned, it carried the mingled scents of ash and pine south across the King's Road, as if the North were exhaling grief that had to be borne beyond its borders. Winterfell's walls, pocked by frost fissures and streaked with soot, loomed over a yard crowded by lumber, half-repaired ladders, and heaps of melted mail. The ruins of the ice pillars, now mere puddles that refused to absorb the sun, marked the line where the dead had advanced no farther. And in that sight, many found a bitter comfort. It was uglier proof of hope than any song, but it was proof all the same. Jon Snow spent the better part of those 3 days anywhere work demanded, shoring timbers at the east gate, hauling wounded on stretchers to the great hall infirmary, or pacing the battlements at dusk while freshly fletched arrows clipped against the stone in neat bundles. The deep bruise around his stitched wound pulsed each time he bent or lifted. Yet it was easier to endure pain than linger with the thoughts waiting in quiet corridors. Whenever he paused, he felt an uncanniness in the air, as though a still invisible frost giant had leaned its shoulder against the keep, leaving frost-melt sweat behind. Memory haunted every flagstone. Here a splotch of unnaturally scorched quartz, there the imprint of a White Walker's shattered helm frozen into the mortar. He passed, often, the corner of the Godswood where Rhaegal's body lay draped beneath dark tarpaulins, too enormous to move without disassembling half of Winterfell's outer gate. A work crew of 60 men used pulleys and sledges to slide the dragon's remains toward a ramp dug into the frozen earth, where a stone pit pyre waited. Twice they halted, not from cold or exhaustion, but from unexpected sobs. A dead dragon felt like the death of myth itself, even to northerners mistrustful of southern legend. Jon visited only once, pausing under the weirwood boughs where Bran had been healed. The sap gouges had sealed, leaving pale veins in the trunk. He laid a hand upon the bark and murmured thanks for what it had given and regret for what it had cost. Then he turned away, because staying longer felt like pressing an ear against a tomb. Inside the castle, Bran Stark occupied the solar formerly used by Maester Luwin. Maester Walken moved his cots and vials into an adjoining chamber, but Bran's own instruments were stranger. Smooth white stones etched with spiral patterns, a handful of sacred ash in a bronze bowl, and quills made from raven feathers left uncut, as if they served some function beyond writing. His mended legs, still mottled with branch-white scars, remained weak. He walked only with aid and never far. Yet his eyes tracked everything, the gray of northern sky after snowfall, and behind them some quiet calculus played out that even Tyrion could only guess at. Tyrion had tried, of course. On the second night, he brought a flagon of Dornish red and 2 battered cups. Bran accepted neither drink nor conversation, longer than a single question. How many secret passages lie beneath the Red Keep? Tyrion answered truthfully, 14 that he knew and likely more besides. Bran nodded, satisfied, and dismissed him with the courtesy of a crowned prince in a small folk market. Gentle, distant, unburdened by etiquette. Tyrion left unsettled, uncertain whether he'd been interrogated or confided in. Arya remained restless. The pack of wolves she'd slipped away to track had merged into the gloom beyond the shivering wood, and she returned to Winterfell only when meals turned cold, and Sansa worried aloud. She trained sparring partners who quickly regretted volunteering, then vanished for a day, riding south as if chasing the scent of unfinished vengeance. When she returned, she bore new blades, narrow, curved things of Bravasi steel, and a silent vow in her eyes. Only Bran seemed to settle her, though nothing passed between them save a glance. His that measured time, hers that weighed death. Daenerys moved like a woman carrying shards of glass inside her lungs. Each breath risked splintering. The gash across Drogon's neck had closed, but the raw welt still smoked on cold mornings, and once every hour the great dragon keened, a low mourn too deep to echo. Workers dragged huge braziers beneath his perch, so heat could stave away the chill biting into the torn wing membrane. Daenerys paced beside him, hand-brushing charcoal-black scales, whispering in Valyrian a litany that sounded almost like apology. When Jon finally approached her, she did not turn, but he felt the tension ripple beneath her silver hair. He wanted to fly beside his brother forever, she said, eyes fixed on the horizon, where the pyre smoke curled blue. What meaning has victory if I cannot keep them safe? Jon sought words as careful as tinder in a damp hearth. He died sparing us all, and his name will be spoken in every hall from Bear Island to Dorne. Dragons do not pass into shadow forgotten. She closed her eyes. And what of the throne? The South hears only that a northern bastard rides dragons, and that a Targaryen queen has lost one. Cersei will paint this as weakness. Demiperabra. Jon exhaled. The throne must wait. The North bleeds. We've graves to raise and alliances to mend. Alliances crumble when a kingdom smells weakness. She faced him, sapphire irises sharp with grief-hardened clarity. I left a war unfinished to fight this one. Cersei gathers strength. If we linger, we give her time and fear. Fear serves her the way fire serves me. Jon hesitated. He had never ceased to fear that very outcome, that the Night King's defeat would only open space for the game of crowns to resume, and he would be drawn into a furnace of betrayals colder than any night of ice. The people south of the Neck will not fight for a queen they believe cannot protect herself, he admitted. But if we march too soon, we go half crippled. Winterfell's walls stand, yes, yet half her garrison is wounded. Then we gather new legions on the road, she insisted. The Riverlands levies, the Vale Knights, the rest of the Unsullied at White Harbor. We press on King's Landing before the Iron Fleet fortifies Blackwater Bay. Then? Jon studied her. The set of her jaw mirrored Visenya's statue he'd once seen described in a dusty tome. Stubborn, visionary, lethal. He also saw the tremor that worked its way across her left hand when she squeezed her fist. Grief, not fear, trembled there. I will ride south with you, he said at last, when Winterfell is secure enough that leaving will not risk the work we bled for. She nodded once, accepting temporary compromise but banking coals for later. On the 6th day a raven arrived from the Eyrie, Lord Roy's heavy seal cracked by Sansa's quick hand. She read, eyes flicking, then lowered the parchment. Sweet Robin is dead, she announced to the assembled council. A makeshift circle of Tyrion, Davos, Grey Worm, Arya, 2 captains of the northern houses, and Bran. Tyrion steadied a silver goblet before him. Dead? How? Fell from a balcony at dawn, Sansa said, voice flat. Maester Colen writes that the boy rose early, complaining of a song in the clouds. Guardians found him broken on a courtyard flagstone. Jon frowned. I spent years in the Vale. The Eyrie balconies are walled. A child would have to climb a merlon to fall. Or be pushed, Arya said. Bran closed his eyes briefly, as though he'd glimpsed a shadow flicker beyond the candle's edge. Littlefinger's last loyalist lingered at the Eyrie, he murmured. And Cersei still whispers in every ear that leans south. Tyrion leaned forward, tapping knuckles. With the boy dead, the Vale's knights will swear to a new lord, who stands heir. Jon Royce has the support of most bannermen, Sansa said, but Bronze Jon is not Arryn blood. There's a cousin line. Sir Harold Harding was once named Sweet Robin's heir, though I don't know if he lives. Never Malfoy. He does, Arya replied. I passed him on the King's Road 2 moons ago, riding with 15 lances. Arryn blew on half their cloaks. Then Cersei may curry his favor, Tyrion said grimly. With the Vale and the Iron Fleet, she could choke the royal road before we clear Moat Cailin. Grey Worm's gaze remained fixed on Bran. The one who sees, he said quietly. You know who pushed the child. Bran opened his eyes. Snow thickened every sill that morning. A shadow crossed the moon door 30 heartbeats before dawn. Feathers, dark, not raven, and hands gloved in red leather. Nine. Keyburn's whisperers, Tyrion muttered. He trains raven catchers with crimson gloves, so the birds won't peck. Sansa's mouth tightened. Then Cersei has murdered a child in his own nursery to seize strategic heights. The grief rising in her eyes turned to iron. She will answer for that. Bran lifted a single finger. The Eyrie's death may yet be a key we bend, rather than break. The lords of the Vale love Jon Arryn's honesty. Show them Cersei's treachery, and they might ride under our banners eagerly. Assuming they believe the visions of a cripple who speaks in riddles, Davos muttered, too tired to soften his tone. Bran regarded the Onion Knight without offense. They will believe what they witness themselves. The strategy that took shape over the next fortnight bore Bran's quiet design on every line, though it was Jon's steady voice, and Sansa's crisp command that translated it into orders the lords could repeat beside campfires. 3 columns would march south in staggered waves. The first, lightest and swiftest, comprised Arya's wolf scouts, the remnants of the Knights of the Hollow Hill, who had found in the north a fight worthy of song, and a cadre of unsullied spear-lancers wearing snow-bleached cloaks. Their purpose: reach Moat Cailin fast, clear any Ironborn raiders from the towers, and hold the causeway so the second wave could ford in safety. This second wave bore the weight of Winterfell's hope, carts stacked with dragonglass, maesters tending wounded relocated onto straw beds, and Bran himself, nested in a wain converted to a rolling rookery. A weirwood pole rigged into the chassis carried living green leaves that bent above Bran's head like a traveling shrine. He named the wagon Memory, explaining to Jon that stone walls alone could not protect him. He must remain where stories traveled. The third wave, led by Daenerys atop Drogon, would depart 2 days after the second, once the Black Dragon's neck wound had knitted sufficiently, and consist of the bulk of northern levies, the remaining unsullied, and every horse the Dothraki still alive could ride. Grey Worm argued for fewer delays. Daenerys measured his urgency against Vulcan's warnings and agreed to exactly 2 days, not a heartbeat more. Yet for all their planning, each night the wind reminded them of fragility. Jon lay in his solar hearing the hush beyond the shutters, and felt as if the Night King's phantom watched from every star. Dreams came unbidden. Bran's eyes cracked with frost, Rhaegal screaming as he fell, the heart tree bleeding pitch-black tears. He woke before dawn, sweating, and found that Ghost already stood at the door, ears pricked. The Deerwolf seldom left Jon now. Where he walked, Ghost drifted at heel like pale smoke. 2 nights before departure, Jon found Bran awake, adjusting the straps that braced his thighs. Moonlight washed the lines of his face into something older than its years. Jon pulled a chair closer. "You should rest." "I see more clearly in darkness," Bran replied. "Daylight is full of noise, colors, warmth, voices all bound to the present moment. Night pairs the world to memory and possibility." Jon folded his hands. "When we ride south, will the weirwood in your wagon be enough? You won't be rooted like you were here." "Nebisab." "It's a door, not a fortress," Bran answered. "I don't need to stay inside it only to know it's ajar. The trees speak whether I'm near or not, but distance dulls the whispers." He hesitated, then added, "There's something you must understand before we face Cersei." Jon stiffened. "What?" "The Game of Thrones is founded on forgetting. King after king rewrites the ledger. Aerys burned scrolls. Robert painted a war into legend. Cersei breaks towers so sons will never learn their father's truths. I will not allow another turning of that wheel. When we take King's Landing, I must sit at the heart of it, at least for a time." Jon blinked. "On the Iron Throne?" "No." Bran smiled faintly. "I would break beneath its weight. But in the Red Keep stands the Weirwood throne, older even than the Targaryens knew. It grew curled in the dark under the city's hill, roots tangled with the crypts of Valeria's stolen dragons. From that seat I can anchor memory to stone. Libraries burn, trees endure. Libraries burn." Jon rubbed at the scar beneath his ribs. "Daenerys means to sit the Iron Throne, and she shall, if her heart remains steady." Bran's voice lowered. "But she will need reminding that thrones serve people, not bloodlines. Your place is beside her. For love, yes, but more so to keep the stories honest." Jon let out a breath. "I'm no king. Kings are myths we cast across men to make them follow. You are the wall between forgetting and becoming." Bran laid a hand on Jon's forearm, his fingers cold, but pulsing with a life that felt like sap through bark. "Swear you'll hold her to the light." "I swear," Jon said. By sunrise, wagons rolled. Sansa stood atop the east parapet, cloak snapping, watching the column snake over the drawbridge. She had argued fiercely against both Jon and Arya leaving at once. The thought of Winterfell without a Stark male felt like freezing rain against her heart. Yet duty cut that wound open anew. Winterfell would remain hers to guard. She accepted it with quiet ceremony, calling each bannerman to renew vows of protection. Before Jon rode, She pressed a strip of direwolf-haired cloth into his palm. "A favor," she said. "That smells enough like home you'll find your way back." Tyrion rode beside the memory wagon. He'd chosen no command post yet. His role, as he put it, was to predict Cersei's next cruelty and ensure they stepped sideways instead of through it. He spent idle miles conversing with Bran, but most answers came in nods and the occasional cryptic phrase. Only once did Bran chuckle, when Tyrion quipped that he felt like a flea instructing a mammoth on the nuances of itch. When the first column reached Moat Cailin, Arya's scouts discovered flayed men staked along the causeway. 3 Bolton deserters and a northern farmer who had vanished weeks prior. The Ironborn had left them as warnings, but Arya found the Reavers themselves huddled in a tower, drunk on stolen ale and smug for believing the north remained broken. She entered at dusk, needle humming, and by dawn no foe remained to witness the banners crossing the neck. During that skirmish, a raven came for Jon, a black ribbon tied around its leg bearing 2 words, "Ravenscar burned." The message was unsigned, the ink smudged as if scrawled in flight. Gendry, riding now as master of forges on the march, guessed the meaning first. Ravenscar lay on Crackclaw Point, seat of House Massey, loyal to Stannis once and rumored to harbor new smithies for dragon-killing scorpions. If the castle burned, some other hand than Cersei's tightened the noose in the Crownlands. Jon handed the ribbon to Bran. Bran touched the ink, eyes fogging. "Euron Greyjoy," he whispered. "Carried wildfire stolen from the Mad King's vaults. He means to scatter fear like sparks before Cersei's fleet strikes Blackwater Bay." Tyrion's jaw tensed. Euron plays his own game. He'll serve her until serving himself reaps more. Grey Worm proposed doubling the unsullied rearguard to scout the narrow seashore lines, but Bran shook his head. Euron does not fear spears. He hunts dragons. His gaze rested on Jon. "Tell Daenerys to keep Drogon inland until we reach the city." Jon delivered the warning that night as they bivouacked near Maidenpool's outskirts. Daenerys listened, silent, while saddlemen fed buckets of pitch-soaked dung into iron braziers to ward off chill. After Jon finished, she stared into the fire. "I will not hide behind walls while Cersei's green roses bloom on the bay, but I will temper the sky with caution." She looked at him then, with those eyes that seemed at once to plead in command. "Will you ride him with me?" Jon swallowed. Each flight still felt like tumbling through legend, yet grief rode the thermals too. Rhaegal's absence a rift in the horizon. He nodded. Together. They reached the Trident on the 23rd day of March. Snow flurries chased their heels, but the river valley itself lay green, swollen by spring melt that the Night King's silence had not yet stolen. On the far bank waited a host of armored men in sky-blue cloaks. Bronn Jon Royce rode before them, axe at his saddle, and beside him, a young knight bearing the falcon and crescent of Arryn, Sir Harold Harding, broad-shouldered, wary. Jon advanced alone, helm off, sword sheathed. He raised a gloved hand in greeting. "My lords," he called across the rush of water, "I bring the thanks of Winterfell and a plea for justice. The boy you swore to guard lies murdered by a queen who names herself protector of the realm." Royce's voice boomed back. "We are not deaf to the whispers, but we have no proof beyond rumor." "The North carries proof," Arya said, nudging her mare forward. She lifted a canvas bundle and unfurled it. Inside lay the crimson leather gloves Bran had described, still flecked with frost. Caught on Sweet Robin's balcony rail. Harold Harding leaned to study them. "Qyburn's sigil is stitched beneath the wrist," he said softly. "I have sparred with men who wore these when they wrangled ravens at the Red Keep." Royce considered, then signaled. His men stepped aside to reveal a pair of wagons, tarpaulins pulled back. Inside lay half a castle's worth of stored grain and a stack of forged spearheads black as midnight. Sweet Robin stockpiled stores for a siege he dreamed Cersei might send, Royce announced. "We bring them now to feed your host and arm your vanguard, payment for the Vale's debt." The river crossing took a day to complete. That night, Arya found Bran alone near the memory wagon, his gaze turned upward. She knelt. "You guided us true," she whispered. He shook his head. I only listened. The trees shouted. Then, after a beat, "When this ends, sister, where will you go?" She stared at the distant torchlight where men laughed around ale kegs. South perhaps, Bravos, west of Westeros, wherever the map fades. You will always follow stories, Arya. Just remember to leave some behind for others. I'll carve them on the backs of my enemies' skulls if I have to. She grinned, but he saw the question in her gaze, the one she had not asked since the Battle of Winterfell. Did killing the Night King carve her name in some ledger she could not yet read? Bran touched her arm. "You carved hope," he told her. "That's a story enough." She squeezed his hand once before slipping away. King's Landing woke on the first moon with the sunrise painted a bruised gray and gulls screaming above the breaker line. Cersei Lannister stood on the Red Keep's tallest balcony, a goblet of arbor gold warming her palm, and studied the fleet dragging anchor at the mouth of Blackwater Bay. Euron's new flag, a kraken clutching a three-headed dragon skull, fluttered slick in the breeze. Qyburn waited behind her, hands tucked in voluminous sleeves. "Your Grace, the scorpions are mounted along every wall. We have triple the powder casks prepared." "Does the Queen of Ash approach yet?" Cersei asked, eyes narrowing. "Scouts report Dothraki outriders near Duskendale last eventide," Qyburn said. "But no dragons sighted above them." Cersei smiled. "Then the bait works. She fears to lose her last beast." She sipped. The wine tasted like victory and copper. "Your Grace," Qyburn continued, "there is another matter." He proffered a folded parchment. Cersei unfolded it. Inside a single sentence: "The wolf remembers." Beneath, a tiny smear of ash, etched like a paw print. Her smile faded. "Who delivered this?" It appeared upon the chamber of the painted table at Dragonstone, the night their fleet sailed. Cersei crumpled the note. "Superstition." "Perhaps," Qyburn allowed. "Yet the rumor spreads already in Fleabottom, that the North marches with the trees themselves at their backs. Let them whisper." Her voice turned iron. "I have wildfire enough to burn every tree root that worms beneath my city." She whirled, crimson skirts fanning, and her grace gathered about her like coiled smoke. Qyburn followed, expression unreadable. But behind his calm eyes a calculation flickered, the difference between burning stories and becoming one. By the time Jon's column reached the charred shell of Duskendale, Drogon's shadow rippled across stone like a herald of eclipse. From his back Daenerys scanned the coastline. Deep gouges marked by blackened sand where wildfire bombs had scorched beach grass. Mast splinters drifted in the ebb tide, each char streaked neon green. Euron's raiders had razed port villages along the peninsula, torching storehouses and slaughtering garrisoned Lannister men alike. The reek of burnt flesh and tar mingled in sickening waves. Jon rode through the aftermath with Ghost padding ahead, nose low. Survivors emerged from cellars, fishermen missing fingers, mothers pressing bleeding cloth to children's arms. Every third face looked at Drogon with terror, not hope. They had heard only that a dragon queen came, and the flames devouring their homes left no room to parse whose fire burned. Daenerys landed by the shattered docks, dismounted, and spent hours directing Unsullied to dig trenches, lay the dead in linen, and sort charred provisions. She oversaw coins pressed into calloused palms, swore grain would follow from Vale wagons. Yet each time a child flinched from her outstretched hand, she felt the glass shards stir inside again. That night she sat beside Jon in a makeshift command tent. Lantern light danced across maps, weighted by stones. "Every horror they meet along this road, they will lay at my feet," she whispered. "Euron burns villages, and they see only dragons in the sky." Jon traced a river line. "Fear travels faster than truth, but truth endures. We'll show them who brought the fire." "How?" Her voice cracked. "Cersei hides behind walls and blames me for everything beyond them. And there is a part of me," she broke off, inhaling sharply, "that wants to answer fire with fire until nothing of her remains." Jon reached, covering her trembling hand with his. "Vengeance feels just until the ashes cool. I've burned with it myself." He thought of Ollie, of hanging boys barely grown because law demanded. Your father let vengeance guide his torch and scorched the realm. You are not him. She met his gaze, devastation swirling inside. Hold me to that, she whispered. If I falter. I swore I would, he said, repeating Bran's charge without naming it. The host reached the Roserwed 4 days later, banners streaming beneath uncertain skies. Ahead, scouts reported a stand of Lannister spearmen barring the bridge at Bitterbridge, reinforced by new mercenaries, wearing a sigil none recognized. A silver skull pierced by 3 arrows. Tyrion's stomach nodded. The company of the cat, he muttered. SOC sells words once loyal to Volantis. Cersei buys loyalty cheap if blood is foreign. Grey Worm prepared flanking maneuvers as dawn thumbed the horizon, but Bran, half reclined in memory, spoke a single word. Parley. A trap, Davos warned. An opportunity, Bran countered. Their captain is Oscar Pharos, man who lost a sister to the sons of the Harpy in Meereen. He wears the wounds of slavery on his back. Tyrion raised an eyebrow. You saw this? I remember, Bran said simply. So will he. And so Jon rode under a white banner, with only Grey Worm and Tyrion aside him. Oscar Pharos met them mid-bridge. Helmet tucked beneath his arm, pocked scars visible at the collar. When Jon spoke of Meereen's liberation and Daenerys' decree, that no chain be forged again across Deadmaster's gates, something flickered behind the captain's eyes. He asked to read a proclamation of rights in the new realm. Tyrion already had such a parchment drafted. Pharos took it, studying the seal. He looked up at Grey Worm, recognized a fellow freedman by the brand on his cheek. Without word, he signaled his officers. They sheathed swords. The company of the cat stepped aside, opening the bridge without a blow. Pharos left 2 chests of coin piled on the planks. Wages paid bloodless are wages honored, he said, and marched his sellswards north to guard refugees fleeing the wildfire coast. Bran watched them depart through half-glazed eyes. One less song of hatred, he whispered. That night Sansa's raven arrived. Lord Glover and Lady Mormont had repelled a wildling raid at Deepwood Motte. Raiders wearing scraps of Night's Watch black, driven south by rumor of a broken wall. They sought plunder, not war, but 30 dead lay before they fled. Sansa wrote that grief-hardened men, like iron cooled too quickly, brittle at the core. Win quickly, she begged. Every moment of uncertainty breeds new shards in the north. Jon folded the letter, heart aching. War's ripple touched even those saved from ice. He handed the scroll to Daenerys, who read it in silence, then pressed it to her breast with a sigh. On the 30th day they crested the ridge above the Blackwater Rush, and beheld King's Landing sprawled like a tarnished crown at the bay. Fleets dotted the water, Euron's iron-borne ships ringed by wildfire barges, sails dyed black-green. Scorpions jutted from every bastion. But along the mud gate clustered refugees packed so dense the city's stink rose like rot. Cersei had closed her gates to all save gold cloaks and sellswards. Jon saw children swatting at crows above makeshift camps, mothers kneeling in mud wailing for bread. The memory of Hardhome slammed him, thousands begging for salvation as ice closed in. He turned to Daenerys and she read his mind. If we besiege her, innocents die choking on their own waste, she said. If we storm, wildfire consumes them. Tyrion pointed to smoke curling from a hill north of the city. That is Rhaenys' sept, still rubble from the last dragonfire. Cersei buried caches of wildfire beneath the ruins years ago. If we provoke her, she'll ignite them. Now. Bran, listening from his wagon, spoke softly. Time to remind her that memory stands witness. That evening Jon rode under truce flag to the ruins of the dragon pit. Cersei awaited, armored, Qyburn at her elbow, the mountain behind like a tomb carved into flesh. Daenerys descended from Drogon on the opposite flank, wings stirring dust, devils across shattered stones. The arena where dragons had once rattled chains now hosted the ghosts of empire. Cersei's smile was thin as parchment. So the bastards of fire and ice return, begging for peace? Begging for sanity, Jon corrected. Open your gates to your own people, Stand down the wildfire barges. We will negotiate terms that spare this city. Cersei laughed. Spare it? You bring a dragon to my doorstep and speak of sparing. I might have listened, until you marched the cripple seer south. I know the power that boy holds. I remember the whispers little fingers ravens carried. She lifted a hand. I will not live beneath the eyes of a stark ghost. Daenerys stepped forward. Then you choose war. No. Cersei raised her chin. I choose survival. Yours ends here. Qyburn unfurled a green and gold tapestry. Sigils of the 7 kingdoms entwined, except each blazed with wildfire candle marks. A symbol, he intoned. 8 sundown tomorrow. The Queen of the Ashes will burn herself if she dares breach these walls. Jon felt the old anger roar up, and his honor wounded by mad tyranny renewed, but before he could speak, Bran's voice cut through the cracked dome. He appeared at the tunnel mouth, propped on a staff of weirwood inlaid with dragon glass veins. The mountain stepped, hand on sword, but Cersei lifted a finger, curious. Bran gazed into her eyes, which flickered gold in torchlight like coins tumbling. You stand atop a throne built on graves, he said. You fear us because your reign ends the moment truth takes root. Yet truth already coils beneath every stone of this city. He tapped his staff. The marble underfoot quivered. Hairline cracks raced across ancient dragon tiles. From the fissures sprouted thin shoots of white wood, blood-red leaves unfurling like newborn tongues. Gasps filled the pit. Dothraki, Lannister guards, even the mountain's visor reflecting shock. Bran's staff glowed faintly, as though moonlight had sunk into grain. Wildfire may burn flesh, Bran continued, voice rising. But not memory. Set your pyres, Cersei Lannister, and the trees will drink the flames. Carve them into rings for children yet unborn to count. Something flickered in Cersei's eyes, a tremor of the same dread she'd felt when wild roses of wildfire rained on the sept. And yet Tommen still leapt. She glanced at Qyburn. Even he took a step back from the white shoots. She swallowed. Sorcery, she spat. Bran smiled sadly. History. Jon cites the moment. Spare your people. Bend the knee. Stand trial for your crimes, and the realm will judge. Refuse, and we will not burn your city. We'll drown it in truth, until no lie can breathe. Cersei's gaze darted to the mountain's sword hilt, back to Bran. The shoots had already grown knee-high, twisting the cracked tiles like spear points aimed upward. And in her mind's eye she saw those roots bursting through the Red Keep's crypts, reaching the dungeon where wildfire sloshed in ceramic jars, snuffing the flame with ancient hunger. She could rule ashes, yes, but not stone and root that would swallow her pyres whole. Her lips, painted the color of deep wine, thinned. What terms? Daenerys stepped beside Jon. You will open the gates, disarm the scorpions, and surrender the Iron Throne. And my life? Cersei asked, voice smaller. Trial, Jon repeated. Silence hung like a blade. At length she nodded once, no regal gesture, but a woman staring down a precipice. Dawn, she said. The gates open at dawn. They departed without ceremony. Outside, Drogon stretched wings beneath star-streaked sky. Jon mounted behind Daenerys, arms circling her waist as they rose on silent currents. Below, the city's lights flickered many-colored, but none burned the toxic green of wildfire. Yet, dawn came slow, reluctant, as if the sun knew it would witness the moment legends shattered. At the mud gate, gold cloaks unbarred the doors. Refugees shuffled forward, wary, until Unsullied rode in to distribute bread and water. Carts of wounded rolled out first, Cersei's bargaining chip for goodwill, but the crowd did not cheer. They simply watched, hope too fragile to break air just yet. Cersei emerged in black morning gown, crown dull bronze, no gilded lions. She walked flanked by 4 knights, but no mountain. The great monster remained at the Red Keep stair, a sentinel of a kingdom already slipping away. Jon and Daenerys waited at the head of a column of Northmen, whose boots mud-splashed Lannister red cloaks draped as makeshift stretchers. Qyburn carried the crown. He knelt, Before Daenerys. Ace hand to Queen Cersei, I surrender the throne in her name. His voice trembled. Her eyes, once full of syruped cunning, held a clarity near tears. Tyrion watched the exchange, arms folded, and felt a knot had carried since the Blackwater finally slackened. Yet grief pricked him. Cersei had been many things, enemy, sister, ghost, but always the axis of his haunted compass. Now she was only a woman stripped of story, and he, strangely, pitied her. Amid the hush Bran approached. Shoots of weirwood budded already between brickwork along the Street of Sisters, faint as white veins midwinter, but undeniable. He stopped before Cersei. She lifted her chin, but Jon saw her tremor. Bran spoke so softly only those nearest heard. When the first dragons conquered, they believed fire eternal, but even dragonfire cools. Only memory stays hot. Cersei swallowed. Do you take pleasure in my humiliation, boy? No. Bran's gaze was distant, centuries deep, only in endings that let new beginnings breathe. He turned, surveying the city. Then he reached out, fingers brushing Jon's sleeve. Time to come home, he murmured, and Jon understood he meant not Winterfell, but the circle of living thread that bound realm and root, story and blood. Daenerys ascended the Red Keep steps that evening beneath banners hastily hung. The dragon of House Targaryen flanked by the direwolf, the kraken, the rose, the trout, the falcon, each stitched by northern seamstresses through half the march south, threaded into a tapestry of unbroken realm. She did not sit the Iron Throne that night. Instead she stood before it, gloved hand resting on a dent wrought by Robert's hammer years before, and spoke to the lords gathering across the throne room floor. The throne is not my destiny, she declared, voice carrying. It is my burden to wield until the realm can govern itself without fear of flame or frost. Her gaze swept them, a challenge and a promise. I claim it now, but I will melt it down when a council of all kingdoms is ready to forge a new pact. Murmurs flew, some shocked, some hopeful. Jon stepped beside her, sword sheathed, unarmored, a living reminder that vows could bridge houses once sworn enemies. Bran sat in a carved weirwood chair at the foot of the dais, roots intertwining like serpents. His presence declared, history will watch. And so the night deepened. Far below, in the streets of King's Landing, children followed unsullied drummers beating a slow cadence. They carried torches to braziers where wild dogs once pawed bone. One by one, torches lowered and hissed out. The fires for war guttered, and in place of their smoke rose stories, told in winehouses, whispered in alleyways, inked on parchment by maesters who squinted at the date and wondered if this dawn marked a new age or merely another turning of an old wheel. In the high chambers, Daenerys leaned against a balcony. Jon joined her, moonlight touching his scarred cheek. It isn't over, she said. No, he agreed. But it's begun. Below, roots cracked flagstones, leaf tips rustling in wind heavy with sea salt and dust. Memory, sprouting. Above, Drogon wheeled alone. Last of his kind, sentinel of sky in flame. And somewhere in the dark, a lone direwolf answered with a howl that echoed off columns and into the veins of stone. The first snow of winter drifted across King's Landing only 3 days after the banners of the Lion were lowered, as though the wall's vanished spirit still wished to show the South what true cold felt like. Flakes hissed on the forge fires lining the street of steel, gathering on tiles and shoulders unused to anything harsher than rain. Where wildfire casks and scorpions had stood, blacksmiths now hammered plowshares and shovelheads for rebuilding. Where gold cloaks had driven starving small folk from the gates, the unsullied ladled onion soup and barley into chipped wooden bowls. Jon strode those streets at dawn, ghosting along in a swirl of white that made urchins gasp and reach shy fingers. He answered their timid smiles with quiet nods, but his thoughts lay in the domed hall behind him, where Daenerys met with lords still unraveling the idea that a queen might melt her own share of swords. Last night they had gathered, a score of banners, shapes stabbing the hall like a forest of strange trees. Lord Jon Royce's bass. Rumble countered Mathis Rowan's measured cadence. Lord Tarley spoke curtly for Reach Harvest, Edmure Tully for Riverland Levees. Sir Davos, plain as salt, reminded each what the war for Dawn had cost. Bran sat among them, unmoving but never still. Eyes half-lidded, fingers brushing the arm of his weirwood chair, as though strumming unseen chords. When argument grew sharp, Lady Merton's railing that dragonfire would ruin seedbeds, Bran's voice cut through. Fire fed the first fields along the Blackwater. Ash breaks open the earth, and lets grain root stronger. I watched Valerian sow after dragons cleared rock. Balance, not fear. Silence swallowed the hall. Bran seldom spoke at length. When he did, the past marched in behind every word, and none dared dispute him. In that hush, Daenerys rose and offered the first shape of her council. A great assembly each new moon until a deeper charter could be forged, every lord or lady sending one voice and one vote. 3 small councils beneath it: provision, justice, and memory, the last to be chaired by Bran, until the roots of trust run deep. The lords, half reeling, nodded. It was not consensus. It was the first breath of something that might become law. This morning, though, politics felt far away. Jon had a simpler duty: walk the city, mark where fear still lingered, and think of ways to ease it. He passed the Sept of Baelor, or what shards remained, where children stacked broken stones like dice for a giant's game. A kindly septon in threadbare gray directed them, showing how to wedge flatter pieces beneath jagged ones. "Build up," he said, "and the wind will flow around, not through." Jon stooped to help, setting a cornerstone. The snow melted on his glove, soaking through the stitches Sansa had darned in haste the day they marched. When he straightened, he found Tyrion watching from beneath the arches of the shattered nave. The dwarf's eyes were rimmed red, his beard flecked with white that was not snow. "You look almost priestly, Snow," Tyrion said. "Stack another, and you'll have yourself canonized." "They're only stones," Jon answered. "Just as thrones are only chairs and laws only ink, yet we die for them." Tyrion's smile faltered. He leaned on a crutch. An old wound in his knee had stiffened after weeks in the saddle. "Cersei's trial convenes tomorrow. Daenerys has asked me to prosecute the crown's case." Jon's breath misted. "Can you?" "It will not be easy to list my sister's sins as charges rather than memories, but it must be done." Tyrion sighed. "She won't beg. I think she wants the audience to be appalled and frightened, and then she'll die having made every soul feel filthy for watching. Queen to her last breath." "Justice is not spectacle," Jon said. "Tell that to the mob that once cheered my head on a spike." Tyrion's eyes lifted to the 6-foot sprouts of white-barked saplings pushing through the broken flagstones of the sept's floor. Red leaves shivered despite the still air. "Your brother's doing." Jon nodded. "He said the city forgot its roots. He's giving it new ones." Tyrion exhaled. "I hope those roots drink hypocrisy from the ground faster than it seeps." He adjusted the crutch, then added softly, "Keep Daenerys steady, Jon. Melted metal is easiest shaped before it cools." Daenerys stood alone on the terrace overlooking the Blackwater when Jon returned. No guards, no handmaids. Only the snow swirling about her like pale embers. Drogon roosted on the crag where Balerian's skull once hung. Wings mantled. The great dragon's breath steamed rhythmically, warm clouds in the icy air. She did not turn when Jon stepped beside her. "It falls so gently," she murmured. "I thought winter came only with knives." "Sometimes it drifts," he said. "The danger is when people forget it can still bury cities." She brushed melting flakes from the marble rail. "Tomorrow decides whether King's Landing remembers the worst of fires or the first of springs." Her voice wavered. "Will they think me weak if Cersei is spared?" Jon searched her profile, the set of cheekbone, the tension at her temple. Strength isn't always steel. The North told stories of Bael the Bard. He captured Winterfell without bloodshed by trading songs for freedom. No one called him weak. But songs didn't kill children. She swallowed. "If I let her live, mothers who burned in wildfire will howl in their graves." "Then let justice speak, not vengeance. If the assembly decides death, let it be theirs, not yours." She turned at last. "And if they demand blood, make sure mercy is offered first." He reached, lacing his fingers through hers, feeling how cold they were despite the layers of silk. Bran saw a future where roots and wings kept the realm balanced. We can't afford to saw off either. She studied their joined hands. My father clutched power until his fist closed so tight it crushed him. I won't repeat that. But promise me if I falter you'll. I swore to, Jon said. And you swore to listen. Her shoulders softened. Then stand with me tomorrow. Whatever the assembly decides, we face it together. Bran. Cersei's trial convened at midday in the old throne room of Maegor's Holdfast, walls thick enough to resist even Drogon's flame. Benches where lords had once lounged now seated the new assembly. Northmen in furs, Reachmen in autumn green, Dornish delegates sun-silk cloaks muffled by wool, Ironborn captains smelling of brine. At the center stood a plain wooden dais. Bran's weirwood chair occupied one end, an iron lamp of pale flame the other. Cersei entered, draped in black, hair shorn to her jawline, wrists ringed by silver chains. She walked with head high, but her eyes flicked to the sapling roots crawling across the flagstones. Weeks had pushed them inches farther, subtle but relentless. Two Unsullied positioned her before a single pillar of white stone erected overnight. The witness stone, Bran called it, memory given shape to weigh all words. Tyrion rose as prosecutor. His opening recounted the wildfire under the Sept of Baelor, the ordering of children's deaths at Rosby, the deceit that fractured the North's alliance. A reign of fear cannot call itself stewardship, he finished, for stewardship tends the garden while fear salts the earth. Cersei's defense was thin, crafted by Qyburn yet delivered with icy composure. That all acts were wartime necessity, that wildfire caches had been legacy ordnance from her father's era, that enemies conspired to poison the realm with tales of her cruelty. She denied ordering the murder at the Eyrie. But when Arya stepped forward, cloak flaring to reveal the crimson raven-handling gloves, Cersei's gaze broke for the first time. Her cheek twitched, rage or regret blurring. Testimonies stretched until twilight. A baker from Flea Bottom describing food trucks torched to keep prices high. A former Goldcloak confessing to orders for false witnesses. During Tyrion's own trial, Gendry summoned by the council, confirming rumors of Cersei's plots against Robert's bastards. Each voice touched the witness stone. With every truth the pillar brightened, with every deception it dimmed. By sundown its glow pulsed like a heartbeat. Finally Bran spoke, not from the dais but among the people. His chair wheeled to the center so all could hear. Some crimes, he began, cannot be balanced by gallows or gold. They tear at the fabric of memory, attempt to unwrite lives. Yet memory, like these roots, heals by growing around the wound. Punishment must heal the realm, not widen the tear. Murmurs swept the benches. Bran's gaze fixed on Cersei. If you die today, songs will paint you monster and martyr, both. Children will learn only terror or pity. Better you live and serve what you tried to break. He gestured. Two Unsullied brought forward parchment. You will spend your years rebuilding the orphanages your wildfire filled. You will toil among the lowest walls of the Red Keep forbidden to you. The crown is melted. The queen becomes laborer, so memory mends with humility. Gasps Dottie. Lord Tarly leapt up. Shall conspire again the moment backs turn. Treason festers in surviving serpents. Daenerys, silent till now, addressed him. Then we cut fangs by binding her every move. She wears the shackle of the witness stone, a sigil forged just now from its light. If ever she lies again, once, its glow will dim, and her sentence will revert to death. Nice now once, sir. She turned to Bran. He nodded once. The pillar flared, then shrank like poured wax into a thin circlet, white as bleached bone, which an Unsullied fastened about Cersei's throat. Runes shimmered across it, glowing faintly. Jon watched Cersei's face. A flicker of horror, swallowed by practiced stoicism. In that instant, he recognized how terrifying truth could be to someone who had ruled by sculpting lies. The assembly voted. Beyond the Tarlys and a clutch of Reach lords bound by Tyrell debts, voices carried for the living sentence. Gavel struck slate. Judgment rendered. Cersei was led away, flanked by orphan masters who would oversee her service. The hall exhaled, a sound like ice cracking under spring thaw. Winter's frigid breath lingered, but life quickened under it. Within a fortnight, smiths began melting down the Iron Throne. Each sword, once symbol of conquered houses, was catalogued by maesters, blade names preserved before steel plunged into crucibles. Daenerys decreed 1/10 of the metal to be recast into tools for every region whose sword had contributed. The rest would shape a memorial arch over the new assembly chamber, to remind all who entered what became of tyranny. Jon rode north with a small contingent to restore order along the King's Road. Bandits, smelling power vacuum, had begun harassing refugee trains. With him rode Sir Podrick Payne, knighted after the long night, and Lady Lyanna Mormont, armor still too large but ferocity undimmed. When they broke a robber camp near Sow's Horn, Jon saw how war's tail stung hardest after the head was severed. The bandits were deserters, some Lannister, some Golden Company, none older than 20. They surrendered weeping. Jon ordered bread and blankets instead of rope, to the puzzlement of watching farmers. Dead men build nothing, he told them, and left the youths under Tarly oversight to pave the road they'd preyed upon. In King's Landing, Arya trained with the City Watch's new recruits, her Braavosi blades flashing. She refused rank, but shaped their silent step patrols, teaching them the art of seeing without being seen. Whispers named her Nightcat, prowling rooftops when moon rose. Ghost often padded beside her on those patrols. No footpad dared test a city guarded by girl and Ghostwolf. Tyrion presided over the Provision Council, turning grain levies into equitable shares. He wrangled Dornish dryness with northern damp, arranged trade routes that wove grain south and citrus north. When arguments frayed, he pointed at the melted slag that once was a sword of House Rain. "I know what happens when hungry lords sing too loudly," he'd quip, and laughter eased tension if not memories. Bran spent his hours in the crypt root chamber below Maegor's Holdfast, where saplings threaded dragon bones. He set scribes to copying histories long suppressed. Scrolls on the children of the forest, the pact of the first men, Valyrian treatises on governance by council rather than crown. Sometimes Daenerys visited, and they spoke of dragons. Why 3 heads had once been prophecy, why only one remained now. Bran offered no easy answers, only that dragons, like stories, adapt or fade. Drogon adapted. He took to soaring inland, patrolling grain wagons, roosting at dusk on the smoking mount of Dragonstone, where new eggs might one day hatch. Daenerys missed his shadow over the palace, yet she understood. She and Jon often rode to the island, alone save Rhaegal's silent cairn. There, among basalt cliffs, they spoke not of thrones but of simple memories, of Ned's words by Winterfell's gate, of Viserys frightening her with tales of dragonlords, of Ygritte laughing in the caves. Each story exchanged was a stone laid in a bridge between their lives. And one night, watching the tide mirror starlight, Daenerys said, "Let the council elect my successor when the time comes. Promise me you will stand as candidate only if they ask, not if I plead." Jon nodded. "The realm will choose its need, not my want." She kissed him, salt and wind between them, and he tasted promise as sharp as northern snow. Spring's first crocus speared mud outside the Sept ruins when word arrived from the Reach. The drought of leadership had cracked Highgarden's alliances. Randyll Tarly, though sworn to Daenerys, had angered vassals by requisitioning seed grain. Bandits styled as Lady Bracken's free roses torched warehouses. Daenerys convened emergency council. Tyrion urged, sending Davos and a treasury loan. Grey Worm favored unsullied detachments. Sansa, attending by Raven since winter storms barred the neck, cautioned that aid must include Reachman voices or risk seeming occupation. Bran closed his eyes. "Send the queen," he said. "Not in bronze or silk, but cloak and satchel. Let her speak as farmer's daughter, not dragon's." A hush followed. Tyrion blinked. Ride incognito into potential revolt? Suicide. But Jon saw the glint in Daenerys' eyes. Challenge accepted. He volunteered at once, as did Arya Podrick, and even Lady Lyanna, who argued that the South should meet a northern lady unfazed by bandits. The party departed at dawn, leaving King's Landing in Grey Worm's disciplined hands and Tyrion's wry mutters. They rode light, no banners. Along the Mander, they found parched fields. Winter water had frozen the channels, and sudden thaw drowned seed beds. At a village near Horsemill they met Lady Bracken herself, no outlaw but a grim widow, whose orchard taxes had tripled. She mistook Daenerys for a Dornish envoy. When the truth emerged, she spat at the ground. "Dragons cost us sons in your Silver Queen's war. Now Tarly empties our barns for your city's bellies." Daenerys dismounted, knelt, and pressed palm to cracked earth. "A queen who lives above stone walls forgets how soil dies," she said. "Show me your fields." Before Bracken could sneer, Jon added, "And I'll show you you're not alone. The North wrestles ice. The Reach wrestles drought. Together, we'll wrestle Casterly Rock into paying what it owes for all its hoarded gold." Bracken's frost cracked. She snorted, amused despite herself. If the rock paid grain in copper would eat like kings, then copper you shall have. Tyrion's promise found them days later. 2 wagons heavy with Lannister treasury, escorted by Sellswords now sworn to the crown for pay more honest than Cersei's. Lady Bracken watched those coffers stack in her barn, and said perhaps dragons blew rain clouds after all. In Highgarden, Lord Tarly received Daenerys barefoot in his mother's herb courtyard. Flowering vines masked char scars where Cersei's men had torched Tyrell banners 2 years earlier. He knelt when she revealed herself, but protested alone. "It insults the Reach to beg coin after giving sons," he said. "It honors the Reach," Daenerys answered, "to invest in the realm it feeds." She set parchment before him. A charter of rotational levies, Reach grain stored in Winterfell's ice cellars against drought, northern lumber shipped south for dike repair, Dornish glasshouses teaching citrus grafting along the Mander. Stronger together, read the seal, a direwolf and a dragon twisted round an open book. Tarly studied it. Pride warred with practicality, but at last he signed. "If this fails," he warned Jon quietly, "roots or not, lords will blame bleeding hearts." "So be it," Jon said. "Better hearts bleed than people starve." Weeks turned. The realm breathed, ragged but breathing. Refugees reclaimed burned villages. Sellswords found coin in road repair. Cersei's collar glowed steady as she laid bricks for a new orphan dormitory beside the dragon pit. Small folk spat at her shadow at first, but when she neither flinched nor snapped, the spitting ceased. One night, a child left bread crusts by her pallet. She stared long before eating. The witness stone's glow brightened. Within the Red Keep, Daenerys and the council drafted the Charter of the 6 Kingdoms. She would not force an absent 7th. Dorne kept prince in all, but name autonomy. The Iron Islands bargained fishing rights for wood quotas. The Vale, shepherded by Jon Royce, pledged watch over mountain passes. And in the north, Sansa oversaw the sowing of dragonglass orchards, saplings grafted with black shards, to remind every hunter's trail of Dawn's long battle. The night the charter ink dried, Bran summoned Jon alone to the Godswood, budding in the old courtyard. Pale leaves rustled overhead. Roots cracked flagstones where Arya once danced with Needle. Bran's chair rested before the heart tree trunk. No carved face yet, only living bark. "Sit," Bran said. Jon lowered himself, uneasy. "The roots hum," Bran murmured. "They speak of storms across the sea, new dragons stirring, old powers waking in Valyria's shadow." Jon frowned. "Threat? Possibility." Bran touched the trunk. "The realm will heal, or fissure, depending how stories travel. Soon you must carry one east." "East?" "The world isn't a circle, Jon. It's a web, and our victory here tugged another strand." He smiled almost boyishly. "Would you sail with Arya? She seeks the edge of every map." Jon's heart stuttered. "Leave Westeros? Abandon Daenerys?" "Not abandon," Bran said, sensing the unspoken. "Journeys make home stronger when you return." Before Jon could answer, footsteps approached, Daenerys, candle in hand. She looked between brothers. "Am I intruding?" Not at all, Bran said. We were just discussing far horizons. Her brow lifted. Horizons can wait. Tonight the council feasts. Wills ratified, treasury balanced, and not a single throat cut in a fortnight. Miracles demand wine. Bran wheeled away toward the lights, leaving Jon and Daenerys under the rustling leaves. She slipped her fingers into his. Storms across the sea? She asked. So he says. Her gaze slid to the moon cresting over the bay. Someday, perhaps. For now, stay. Help me finish what we began. Jon squeezed her hand. Always. Even as he spoke, he felt the tug Bran meant. A thread toward uncharted water, but anchor lines bound him here. Vows still warm, fields yet ungrown. Journeys, yes, but first harvest. They walked back toward the hall where music spilled out. Dornish lute, northern fiddle, Braavosi drum, blending into one reckless rhythm. At the threshold they paused. Around them the air smelled of roasted hare and rosemary, of lamp oil and fresh ink, of snowmelt trickling through roots that would one day widen and lift the palace stones so sunlight could pour through. For that moment, the realm felt like a hearth, newly stoked, fragile, glowing, hungry for tending. Jon drew breath, tasting smoke and hope, and stepped into the light beside his queen, ready to feed the fire without letting it consume the story they had saved.